Hello, everybody. I hope you all can hear me okay. Welcome to Coproduce Care, and this is one of our first live streams we've done in a very long time, but I'm really excited for this one, as I am for all of them, but this one in particular because it is World Book Day. And we have put together a fantastic program with people who are relatively local to us, authors who've done some fantastic work, who are going to read something that's important to them. And also you'll have an opportunity to ask some questions. Maybe you're thinking of publishing something yourself, or maybe you want to understand what it's like to get something on writing, or have any type of question that you want to pop in the chat, or even just to say hello, then do keep the chat really fluid and open. Obviously, we are doing this live, but we do encourage people to watch this afterwards. We get most of our views after going live because people are at work and busy. So if you are doing that, then do remember to subscribe, and do remember that you can share on Facebook and YouTube and on LinkedIn, or on any platform that you're watching us. So today we are going to be concentrating on works that people have been doing, and we've got some fantastic authors, as I've said. We've got Debbie Young, who will be joining us, Lucienne Boyce, and Luke Palmer, who's recorded something for us. So we are very lucky to get some fantastic authors with us today, and we wanted to do something specifically for the social care sector, but obviously anyone can enjoy and can look at this and can enjoy the material that we're doing today. So I thought I would kick off in this intro part, just reading something that I find is really interesting, and I enjoy reading. And it is something from an author that I have been introduced to recently. And what I will do actually is try and share my screen with you, because I haven't put this as a prep. And it's Maya Angelou, and she's written a poem called Phenomenal Woman. And the reason why I liked this one was because the care sector, we have men and women working in the sector, of course, but the majority of them are women. And I think sometimes we just need a little bit of a pick-me-up. And I definitely read this poem and felt really quite good about myself. So I thought that would be quite a nice one to share with everyone. Now, the way I'm going to share it isn't perfect. Let's see if I can get something a bit better for you. Yeah, there we are. So bear with me a second while I share this. And some of you may know it, and some of you might not know it. There we are. Okay, so it's a little bit crude, but do bear with us. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to put this up whilst I do this for you. There we are. Okay, so I'm hoping that once I take that down, you can see, yeah, perfect. Okay, so Phenomenal Woman by Maya Angelou. Pretty women wonder where my secret lies. I'm not cute or built to suit a fashion model size, but when I start to tell them, they think I'm telling lies. I say, it's in the reach of my arms, the span of my hips, the stride of my step, the curl of my lips. I'm a woman phenomenally, phenomenal woman, that's me. I walk into a room just as cool as you please, and to a man the fellows stand or fall down on their knees. Then they swarm around me, a hive of honeybees. I say, it's the fire in my eyes and the flash of my teeth the swing in my waist and the joy in my feet. I'm a woman phenomenally, phenomenal woman. That's me. Men themselves have wondered what they see in me. They try to so much, but they can't touch my inner mystery. When I try to show them, they say they still can't see. Hold on a minute. This hasn't got the whole thing. Bear with me a sec. Sorry, this isn't very slick. Here we go. Phenomenal woman, that's me. Now you understand just why my head's not bowed. I don't shout or jump about or have to talk real loud. When you see me passing, it ought to make you proud. I say it's in the click of my heels, the bend of my hair, the palm of my hand, the need of my care. Because I'm a woman phenomenally, phenomenal woman, that's me. Okay. Thank you for bearing with me on that one. Okay, so I think what we will do without further ado is introduce Debbie Young. So Debbie, I'm going to bring you into the stream with us. Thank you so much for joining us. For anyone who doesn't know much about you or is new to your work, maybe you could give us a bit of an introduction and the kind of work that you've done, and then over to you to read something, and then we'll check the chat if there are any questions. Is that okay?
Yeah, fine. What I thought I'd do is I'd talk a little bit about reading, a little bit about writing, and the part that both of those have played in my life and hope will play in everybody's lives, and then tell you a little bit more about my writing, and I'll be reading an extract from one of my books called The Natter of Knitters, which is a little bit fun.
Great.
Okay, so very pleased to be here. I think it's fantastic that you're celebrating World Book Day for grown-ups. It's not just the kids that get to have fun with books and reading. So this is great, and I really enjoyed the poem that you shared just now, Sophie. I've always been an avid reader, read lots and lots of different things, and I really enjoy escaping into a good book. When times are tough, books can be especially comforting and even healing. In fact, when I had pneumonia a few years ago, I had a gift of a box of P.G. Wodehouse novels, which were very, very funny, and I'm sure they were a better tonic and healed me faster than any of the medication that I was taking. During the pandemic, this last couple of years, I've started each day quietly reading, enjoying a chapter or two of a different book each day, and it's been so grounding and calming. So whatever kind of troubles, I think books help. If you're not sure that reading is for you, if you haven't really read many books since you were a child, maybe you just haven't found the right book. And I would really recommend that if anyone is wondering what they should read, how they can find books that they will enjoy, visit your local library. Librarians are very knowledgeable and they love talking to people and making recommendations. So go and have a chat with your local librarian and they'll be pleased to help you find something that you will enjoy reading. Like reading, writing has been very therapeutic for me as well, not only in times of trouble, but also when things have been hard. For many years, I kept diaries. I think the oldest one I've got is from when I was 8 years old. And for the last 12 years, I've gone on to blogging. So I share my thoughts on a blog, which you can find on my website, rather than in a diary, so the more modern way, I guess. And I also enjoy writing fiction and non-fiction too, for other people to read. Writing can be a really enjoyable hobby like reading. It costs you next to nothing. If you've never tried just writing for fun, then give it a go. Doesn't matter if you don't plan to write a book, writing for your eyes only is fine. No need to share it with anyone unless you want to. All you need is a notebook and pen. If you're old school like me, I like a nice fountain pen and notebook, or you can write on your computer, but I think writing by hand is good fun. Just write whatever comes into your head for a few moments each day. First thing in the morning is great before the day gets busy for you. And if you keep at it for a few weeks, you'll surprise yourself. You'll find you're writing what matters to you. You'll understand and work through your own feelings, and you are likely to uncover thoughts and feelings and interests that you didn't even know you had. So it's a good, fun experiment to do, and it can become a lifelong habit, and you'll feel better for it. And then you might even find yourself writing stories that you want to share, or writing memoir that you want to share as well, like Lucienne, Luke and I are doing today. So as to my own writing, I've written 9 novels and lots of shorter stories as well. The one that I'm going to be reading from is a short, slim little quick read. I write what's known in the trade as Cosy Mystery. So they're sort of crime stories, but they're so the crime is the jumping off point for the mystery, or a misdemeanor. Even doesn't need to be a serious crime, or it doesn't have to be a murder. And the stories are never dark or graphic or bloodthirsty. There's enough of that in the real world. I like to write lighter stuff. So my stories provide gentle, upbeat entertainment that will leave you smiling and hopefully make you laugh out loud along the way too, as well as addressing some serious issues that sort of underpin everything that I write. They're set in the Cotswolds where I live. I live just north of Chip in Sodbury. And they have a strong sense of place, strong sense of the Cotswolds, and a cast of quirky characters, most of whom are lovable, but there's the odd villain in there who are the kind of villain that you love to hate. Not quite in a pantomime style, but an enjoyable kind of villain, if you like. So my inspiration has come from my home village. I've lived in the Cotswolds for 30 years, and when I first moved here I was really impressed by having lived in a place where I didn't even know my next door neighbours. Where I live now, everybody knows each other, everyone looks out for each other, and they support each other in good times and bad. The village has really come together in the pandemic, for example, and I write to celebrate that sense of community and to share it. My stories show that when people take time to get to know and understand each other, the world can be a more tolerant and generous place. And the conflict in my stories, and often some of the comedy, comes from fundamental misunderstandings between people that are eventually resolved. And I'm hoping that the resolutions in my stories will inspire readers to be equally interested and caring about their own friends and neighbours. So without more ado, on to my reading. This is a little extract, as I said, from the Natter of Knitters. It's a little novelette in which a troubled young woman called Ariel moves to the fictitious Cotswold village of Wendlebury Barrow, where my story is set, and how she finds comfort and self-knowledge through the understanding and compassion of her neighbours. When she first comes to the village, the community is not sure what to make of her hippie-ish clothes, highly restricted diet. She's vegan, will only eat fruit, and of her outspoken criticism of some local goings-on. So, for example, the local WI, the pillar of the village, are organising a yarn bombing event, where people do lots of knitting in a good cause. They're knitting scarves for the homeless. They've arranged a photo opportunity where all the scarves are going to be draped on a tree in the village green, and the local paper photographer is going to come out and photograph it, at which point, just as the shutter is about to click, Ariel appears naked, waving a placard in protest against the knitting and the cruelty to sheep of knitting, and then a smoke bomb explodes and she sinks to the ground. Sophie Sayers, who works in the local bookshop, narrates the story. Hector came to Ariel's rescue, scooping her up in his arms. He never does that to me, was my unworthy thought as I finished buttoning my coat around her. From the ease with which he'd lifted her, she must have weighed as little as a child. I'd known she was slender, but I hadn't realised till then just how emaciated she was. Whenever I'd seen her, she'd been wearing baggy clothing. As Hector laid her down on the park bench, Carol and a doctor, who lives in the village, dashed over to help. As a distraction, Mrs. Fortescue clapped her hands for attention, thanked everyone for coming, and tried to send them on their way. I leaned the placard against the bench in case Ariel wanted to take it home with her. This was the first time I'd been able to read what it said. "Say no to knitting, let sheep safely graze." Hardly the slogan of a terrorist. As soon as the photographer had gone, I returned to Ariel's side. She was conscious now and her eyes were open, but her skin was paler than ever. The doctor had put his own coat over her prostrate body for extra warmth before taking her pulse. Ariel turned to look at me, a pleading, mournful expression in her eyes. "You know it wasn't me, Sophie, don't you? Not the bomb. I wouldn't do any harm." "Of course not. Do no harm. That's what this is all about, isn't it?" The doctor frowned at me. "Are you referring to the Hippocratic Oath? It's a myth, the first do no harm business. We don't take any such oath in this country." "Actually, no. I'm talking about Jainism. Do no harm is their guiding principle, not only to others, but ultimately to themselves. That's where That's where Ariel's notion of fruitarianism comes from. Not only do you not harm the source of your food, but you protect yourself too. You do no harm so that you better preserve your own life. I'd read online about the practice of extremely selective eating as part of the rejection of anything else remotely harmful in life. It all stacked up now alongside Ariel's attitude to wool. She wasn't just vegan. She was eating this way in hope of avoiding the premature death that had claimed her parents. She had yet to come to terms with losing them. I took her hands in mine. Oh, Ariel, you poor thing. You've been trying so hard since your mum died, haven't you? But you've gone too far. Her moist eyes, too big for her emaciated face, gazed up at me like a frightened puppy's. I kept my voice gentle and low. This won't bring them back, you know, nor is it keeping you from harm. Ariel slid her hands free of mine to cover her face and began to weep silently. When instinctively I put my arms around her, she leaned into me, accepting what comfort I could offer. When finally she'd stopped crying, I encouraged her to stand up, and with Carol and me on either side of her, we walked across the green to her cottage. The doctor followed and did a few final checks before declaring she was fine, but could do with a rest and a more nourishing diet, a balanced vegan menu at the very least. Carol had other ideas. She dashed back to her shop, reappearing a few minutes later bearing a basket filled with bread, bacon, eggs, butter, mushrooms and tomatoes. Ariel eyed Carol's basket with obvious longing. I'm so hungry, she wailed. That's just the sort of breakfast my mum used to make me. Then she fell upon the contents, laying them out on the kitchen table and rummaging in the dresser for a plate and cutlery. You go and get dressed now, said Carol, heading for the cooker, and by the time you come down, I'll have made you a lovely, hearty breakfast. I bloody hate fruit, said Ariel over her shoulder as she headed for the stairs. Oh, I can't hear you, Sophie.
There we are. Yes, I could see it, but I just couldn't get my my hand to the mouth quick enough. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. I really, really enjoyed that, and I loved the connection you made between the food choices and also something emotional that happened in her life, and explained that out. That was really, really interesting. And your journey towards coming into writing and what inspires you. And Chipping Sawbury is a great area because I used to go to school there. So yeah, I've always loved it. I haven't been there for years, but it's just, I feel like it's kind of like stuck in time a little bit. But it's probably changed a lot since then. But yeah, it's a lovely area, and really enjoyed listening to your work. And I really want to hear what happens next. So I think that's my next book choice. And I suppose we're all on World Book Day looking for inspiration and looking for ideas. And that was really fruitful for me. I really enjoyed that. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Very glad to be here.
And we haven't got any questions at the moment, but if anything does come up, then we will let you know. So if you're able to hang on, but if you have to go, that's fine.
Yeah, I'll hang on.
Yeah, okay, lovely. I mean, the only question that I had is, in the future, what kind of writing do you hope to be doing? Have you got anything in the works?
Yes, I'm currently writing my 10th novel, and that's the third in a series of books which is set in a boarding school, a girls' boarding school, which is a different kind of community. So it's a similar village community, and again now I've got similar themes there, where there are pupils and staff at the school who are troubled in different ways, and it's by coming together and understanding each other more that their problems are resolved. In those stories, I'm not writing about murder. I'm moving away from writing about murder, because my series of 7 books, Sophie Sayers Village Mysteries, feature murders. Although sometimes I don't really like murdering people. I sometimes have a stay of execution and let people escape, you know.
Yeah.
And the court. But I'm moving more towards other kinds of conflict, and also in sort of the traditional Agatha Christie vein. I quite fancy writing about things like jewellery thefts and less, not violent crimes, but just interesting crimes, about imposters and that sort of thing is quite fun to write about as well. And there's never any shortage of ideas in the village. I'm very involved in village life. I'm in the village choir. I'm a bell ringer, and all the different things along with the village shop committee. And wherever I go in the village, people are always saying to me, "Oh, have you thought about? Are you going to do a story about bell ringing? Are you going to do one about the choir?" And so they're all on my list. Lots of.
That's amazing. But are people ever a little bit curious as to whether they are represented as one of the characters in your book, or are they quite excited about that?
I think I try very hard to make sure that all my characters are made up, although the situations are very similar. You know, the setting and the different events that go on in village life are inspired by a real village. All my characters are made up, and I've never yet had anybody claim to have spotted themselves in one of my stories in the village. So, but I wouldn't be surprised if people do look for themselves.
I would. If I knew you, I would be looking for myself in there. Oh no, that's really interesting. Thank you so much, and I will say goodbye to you for now, and bring in our next speaker. Take care for now. Oh, great. There you are. Hello, Lucienne. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you again so much for joining us. So I think we'll probably follow the same format. And if you could just introduce yourself to people listening in, and then explain what you're planning on doing, and reading, and anything else you think might be useful for people to hear about today. And then we'll see if there are any questions at the end of that. So yes, over to you, Lucienne.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say that was a wonderful poem. Fantastic choice. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you.
I hope everyone else heard it. Hope nobody missed the beginning. Yes, so World Book Day, fantastic. What do? I write historical fiction, non-fiction and biography. My non-fiction books include the Bristol Suffragettes, which is a history of the local militant suffrage campaign. And I'm currently working on a biography of a suffrage campaigner called Millicent Price. Millicent was also a pacifist, and her husband was a conscientious objector during the First World War. Well, I think most writers write the sorts of stories they like to read. At least they think it would be very odd to write in a genre you don't like. I mean, why would you write vampire stories if you hate vampires, for example? But you never know. There's probably someone out there to prove me wrong and say they've written something they totally hated doing. But I think for now, I'm going to stick my neck out and say I think most writers write the sort of stories they like to read. Well, I love to read mystery or detective stories, and I write historical mysteries, history mysteries. My historical fiction books so far are set in the 18th century. My first book is a standalone novel called To the Fairland, and it's about a voyage to the South Seas with a deadly secret at its heart. And my other books are the Dan Foster mysteries, also set in the 18th century. There are 3 full-length novels so far. Bloody Bones, which I'm going to read a bit from in a little bit, The Butcher's Block, and Death Makes No Distinction. And there's also a prequel novella called The Fatal Coin. And the next Dan Foster is due out later this year. So who's Dan Foster? Well, he's a Bow Street runner, which means he's one of the earliest English detectives. And he's also a man who's come up in the world the hard way. He was an abandoned child who lived by thieving until a good man rescued him from the streets. And sadly, such children were all too common in the 18th century. And so Dan has a lot of sympathy for the poor and for the criminal classes, but he's also got a duty to uphold the law, which, as you can imagine, can make things difficult for him. And as you might guess from my non-fiction work on the women's suffrage movement, I'm interested in the history of protest and reform movements, and I get a lot of my inspiration from the stories of rebels and reformers. So in my books, I have radicals demanding parliamentary reform, though of course in the 18th century they were only thinking of votes for men, anti-slavery campaigners, and women struggling to get by when all the odds are stacked against them. But there's mystery too, and through it all, Dan Foster has to tread a path bringing down the bad guys and trying to be fair to the good guys. So I've chosen to read a passage from Bloody Bones. This is the first Dan Foster mystery, And it's about the anti-enclosure movement. Sounds really unexciting, but in fact, enclosure was really important. It was when the great landowners grabbed common land for themselves, they fenced it off, and they stopped people like farm labourers, cottage dwellers, and smallholders exercising their ancient rights over the land. People had rights such as the right to graze livestock, catch rabbits, or collect firewood, and they relied on these things as a way of getting by. I mean, it was part of their economy. But taking it away from them made them poor, and it drove them into the workhouses. So people fought back. They rioted, they protested, they tried to protect their rights, and in so doing, they risked transportation or the death penalty. Well, in the middle of all this turmoil, in the book, Lord Oldfield of Barkham, incidentally, is based on Wellow, which is near Bath, if anyone's interested, and he encloses Barkham Wood. And when his gamekeeper, a man called Josh Castle, is murdered, he sends Bow Street runner Dan Foster to investigate the killing. Well, Dan goes undercover to infiltrate a local poaching gang. And in this scene, he's walking near the wood with Singleton, who's the village blacksmith. And Singleton tells Dan a story which helps Dan to understand why Josh Castle, Lord Oldfield's murdered gamekeeper, was so unpopular. So this is from Bloody Bones. They came to a spur of the wood which had encroached onto the heath and turned left to follow the line of the wooden palings around the trees. The ground was smooth and level closer to the fence and would have been easier to walk on, but when Dan moved towards it, Singleton pulled him back. They keep a particular eye on this part of the wood. Don't get too close, or else they'll accuse you of going in. There's no one about. Looks like it, Singleton agreed, but the keepers are in there somewhere. Remember that, my lad. It's transportation now for a man to walk in a forest his dad and granddad knew as well as their own gardens. Further on, they reached a patch of recently abandoned, cultivated land on the edge of the wood. The soil was trampled and the plants broken or gone to seed, and weeds and nettles had sprung up in the midden. In the centre of the plot was a rectangle where a dwelling house once stood, the abandoned hearth with its ring of blackened stone a forlorn sight. Beams and bits of reed from the thatch still lay about, but the site had been stripped of anything of any use to other builders. Has there been a fire here? Asked Dan. No, this was Bob Budd's house. Lord Adam threw him off the land. Wants to clear the area so it's nice and tidy for his hunting friends. Bob had a family too. Didn't mean nothing to his lordship, though. Betty, Bud's eldest, came to fetch travel, and he fetched me, and we went to Drake to ask if he knew what was going on. Bud only had one cow, and was poor enough to be allowed to graze it on the heath, but Drake had heard no complaints about him. He said perhaps Bud had tried to loose his pig into the forest without taking notice of the new rules. New rules. Singleton spat in the direction of the fence, continued his story. And this is Singleton's story. When Singleton, Drake and Travel reached Bud's place, Lord Oldfield's steward, Mudge, and his men were emptying the cottage, while Castle stood looking on, his gun over his arm. Bud was loading whatever he could onto his cow. The little ones were bawling, Betty was trying to keep them quiet, and their mother was screaming at him to stand his ground, but he just went on tying up the bundles. Travel demanded to know what was going on, and Mudge said they were evicting a trespasser. On what grounds? Asked Travel. On the grounds he shouldn't be here, Mudge said. We've got an eviction notice. Signed by Lord Oldfield, the man doing the evicting, Travel retorted. If there's a complaint against Bud, surely it can be dealt with the way we do on the heath, with a fine, Drake said. And you'd all put the money in, Mudge said. Anyway, it isn't Common's business. The forest belongs to his lordship, and he doesn't want squatters on it no more. Bud's father and grandfather lived here before him, Travel said. They have rights in the parish. Not unless they pay rent, which means squatters they don't, Mudge answered. The woman, her hopes raised by Travel's defence, came up to Mudge and said, You can't throw us off. It's not a hut, it's a proper house. It has a chimney. That means we can stay. I don't know where you get that from, and it makes no difference, the steward answered. The house shouldn't be here, and neither should you. Your father came from out the parish, but no one thought of throwing him out, Travel said. My father was no squatter, Mudge snapped. He had a proper settlement here through marrying my mother, and he kept himself by business too, not scavenging on another man's land. Now get out of my way before I make you. Singleton stepped in front of the door, his fists clenched at his side. Drake moved up beside him. Travel followed and ducked behind them. The steward's men looked uncertainly at Mudge, who waved his wide riding whip. Get on with it. There was some pushing and shoving, Travel hopping about without doing much, and it would have come to blows. But Bud said, leave it, lads, we're going. His woman latched onto his arm, cursing and yammering at him to stick up for himself. He bloodied her nose, and she let go. She prowled up and down, still cursing him. You don't need to go, Singleton said. Mudge grinned. But you want to, don't you, Bud? We offered him a choice and he took it. Ain't that right, Mr. Castle? Castle pointed at the heap of gear at his feet. Purse nets, wire snares, and an old gun that looked as if it had been used in Cromwell's war. This is illegal, he said. Bud's had plenty of warnings. It's transportation now if he stays in the parish. But if he leaves, he can go free. Singleton and Drake looked at Travel. He nodded. Transportation. That was the law. Drake asked Bud where he was going. Kingswood. Forest is all I know. At least wait a day or two and we'll get up a collection, Travel said. I don't want money. Bud called the children and their mother over to him, told them to carry what they could. They had to leave their bits of furniture. He cracked his whip over the cow's head and they moved off, his mongrel dog trotting behind. Mudge jerked his head at the dog. Mr. Castle? He would have shot the animal himself if Drake and the others hadn't been there, but after all the talk of legality, he didn't dare. He didn't have the right. That was the gamekeeper's. Castle shook his head. It's enough. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. And I was really struck by almost the political tone of lots of the work that you've done.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And that's really kind of pricked my ears up a little bit. And I just wanted to ask, what brought you to framing your work in that way? Was there any particular experience that you had or injustices that you'd seen or experienced growing up and you thought, actually, I want to represent these in a way in the work that I write about, whether it's about the suffragettes or about any of the other fiction work that you do?
Oh, gosh, that's difficult. Well, I mean, I think in terms of experience, I mean, I think, well, I don't know, really. I mean, people have been struggling for their rights for centuries, and we still haven't got them. And just what goes on in the world at the moment is just deeply depressing. I mean, for me, looking at the history of the 18th century, which was a period when, when there was a lot of reform movements, but also a lot of repression, a lot of political repression. It's really parallel to our own time very much. And so for me, it is a way of commenting on what's happening now by looking back at what happened then and really thinking too about, we like to think we're so advanced that we've moved so far, but still there's such a long way to come. And with the enclosures thing specifically, I mean, I don't have any experience of being evicted or anything like that. I mean, I do have experience of, family being quite poor and having services cut off and that kind of thing, but we were never actually evicted. But say looking at something like that, enclosures, I mean, they're still going on now. We're seeing it in the Amazon. We're seeing people driven off their land so that, can I use the word, capitalists can make money, so people can make money. So yeah, the political thing in the books is very important to me, very important.
And I like the way that you brought out the desperation in one of the characters, trying to say, well, there's a chimney on this building. That means it's not just a hut, it's a house, that it was like kind of making it really personal, and you can really feel their desperation in trying to explain, this is my home. It's not just, a box in a field that someone can just do away with when they're ready. I thought that was really, really good and something that was really sort of, it built a picture in your mind. I can almost see it on screen, if you like, you know. So that was really lovely. And can you talk a bit about your work with the suffragettes? So that's, did you say Bristol?
Yeah, well, I've written about the suffragettes in Bristol, and I do a lot of talks, and I've led walks about them. And the suffragists as well, you know, they were non-militants as well. So the suffragettes were the ones that went around breaking windows and setting fire to buildings and that sort of thing. These are things that I'm afraid I don't actually approve of. I don't believe in violent protest as such. But at the same time, I think we need to understand why people are driven, you know, to do these things, and the sort of things these women were fighting against and fighting for. So yes, I've done quite a lot on suffragettes. I'm currently writing a biography of a woman who was actually both militant and a non-militant. So she's an interesting way for me to explore that tension between violent protest and non-violent protest, and her, you know, she's constantly wondering what she should be doing and that sort of thing. So that's also important bit of work I'm doing, I think, for me anyway, with the suffrage stuff.
That's wonderful. So yes, and another few books for the bookcase, I think. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much. So I'm going to move on to a recording we have for our next guest, but we might come back to you. So thank you so much. And this one now is from our last presenter, Luke Palmer. And I hope you all really enjoy this. And we'll get on to playing that now.
Hello, I'm Luke Palmer, and happy World Book Day. I'm a poet and a novelist. I write poems mostly for myself, publish a few, and I write novels for young adults. I write for a whole host of reasons, really, but mostly because I'm trying to understand something, I think, because I want to explore something, to see where a feeling comes from or where that feeling might go, to get a sense of why a person might act in a certain way, what those actions might be grounded in, or where those actions might lead or could lead. Reading and writing to me are acts of empathy, first and foremost. Escapism, yes, they take us out of ourselves, they give us entertainment, but they make us part of something else, I think, or someone else, and we walk in their shoes, we experience their world for a while. So to read is an act of empathy, or rather an exercise, I think I'd like to say, in empathy. I think empathy is like a muscle, really. We can train it, we can strengthen it, we can make it fitter. And one of the best ways of doing that is to read and to write. And so it's brilliant to have days like today where we can celebrate that. I thought I'd read for you from my debut novel, my first book, which is Grow. Grow is the story of Josh. Josh is a young man who's groomed and radicalised by a far right group, a group of white supremacists. He's suffering quite profoundly from grief, and he needs a lot of care, Josh, which he's not getting for various reasons. In this chapter, we're going to meet Josh and also Josh's mum, who, like Josh, also needs looking after. And there's a huge weight of emotion and unspoken things between these two, and it exists for most of the book. It weighs down every action, every small detail between them is coloured by this. It's a kind of grief-born inertia, I suppose, that's responsible for some pretty horrific things later in the book, because both characters feel responsible for carrying this thing on their own. Which of course is never really the case, and those dialogues, those lines of communication, that sharing is so vital, and that's what books can help with, isn't it? So here is a bit of Grow. This is chapter 1. Mum burns the toast again. The blare of the fire alarm cuts through my dream and has me on my feet in seconds, waving a pillow at the flashing plastic disc on the landing outside my room. It takes a few more painful moments to clear the sensor. Sorry, love, would you like some? Mum's head appears around the banister. There are big red circles under her eyes, and the fire alarm's light carries on flashing for a while after the sound stops, and it feels like there's a place in my ears where it's still echoing. Please, I croak, suddenly aware of myself standing in a pair of grotty boxer shorts. I've passed the age when it's okay for your mum to see you in your pants. I have a quick shower, put my uniform on and lug my backpack downstairs to the table. Mum smiles and pushes a plate towards me and a mug of tea. Despite having burned the last round, hers, the toast, is cold. The tea's not much warmer. I wonder how long she's been up, waiting for me. She leans back against the counter, her dressing gown coming apart a bit at the neck. I stare at my plate, pick up crumbs that have spilled over the edge with the end of my finger. Neither of us speak. A few times she looks like she might be about to say something, ask me about what I'll be doing today, how my friends are getting on, whether I've done all my homework. But she doesn't. It didn't used to be like this. Mornings used to be full of noise and energy and lost keys and the cats needing feeding and making sure I had my lunch and have I got my bus card and where did I leave that folder and when will you be home this evening. But not anymore. After a few moments, Mum starts opening and closing cupboards and making scribbled notes on a pad we keep stuck to the front of the fridge. It's Thursday, the day of the big shop, which means she'll be late home. I finish eating and go back upstairs to clean my teeth. The fire alarm still blinks at me on the landing. I keep the tap running, rinsing my mouth a few times to get the gritty, burnt crumbs out. They get stuck and turn into a doughy sludge. On my way out of the house, Mum stops me in the hallway and puts her hand on my cheek, just holds it there and looks at me. She's been doing this a lot recently. I think it's because my eyes are the same level as hers now. I smile, she does too, and then I walk through the door. It was one of those frosty late autumn mornings where it hurts a bit to breathe. I push my hands deep into the pockets of my coat and pull the collar right up over my chin, the zip between my teeth. The zip has a sharp metallic taste, like blood. You can tell it will be a sunny day later. The cloud or mist or whatever it is seems to stop not far overhead, and there are definitely some blue bits on the other side of it. It was on a day like this, a Monday morning in October just over 2 years ago, that I heard Mum shout my name as I walked down the street. I had run back to her as fast as I could, shrugging my bag off my shoulders as I went. There was something in her voice that sounded like I had to, as if Mum were hidden inside her own body and was shouting at me to get her out. And when I got to her, she looked at me as if she wasn't looking at me. She had the phone clenched to her chest. After a while, she was able to tell me there had been an explosion in London and Dad was dead. So that's the opening of Grow, which is available wherever you buy your books. Thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Goodbye.
So that is it. That is everything from everybody we've asked to come and join us today. And I, for one, really enjoyed all of those contributions. Sorry that we can't have Luke with us today, but he has sent through that video and I really enjoyed watching that as well. And I just think we were just so lucky to have such fantastic writers who were in the Southwest here. So they're local. So we're really lucky to have them with us today. And I just wanted to bring back Debbie and Lucienne into the stream just to have a couple of questions that I had really, and I suppose one of the first ones was how the pandemic has affected your writing, and or has it not? Maybe it hasn't affected your writing at all, but has it made any difference to what you want to write and maybe you have written during the pandemic? Can I come to Debbie for that first?
Sure. Yeah, that's a very good question, because I think pretty much all writers will have been affected in some ways, and it will have affected people differently. I found it very disconcerting initially. My whole sense of how time has worked in the last 2 years has changed, and usually I set myself deadlines and I respond to deadlines. I thrive on deadlines. I'm a last minute person, but time seemed to stand still in a weird way because nothing was changing. We weren't going out. I was shielding for health reasons, and before the pandemic I would be out probably once or twice a week, having coffee with friends. Lucienne and I meet for coffee quite often, and going out and what a great piece of advice that I was given early on for a writer was to have a create date with yourself once a week where you go somewhere to get inspiration, just have a change of scene, freshen yourself up. And I was unable to do that, and that I really missed that, and I'm only really just getting back into that now, going out and about, and it still feels quite odd to be doing that, and I think that affected my productivity. Another another thing that I think a lot of writers have asked themselves is whether we should be writing about the pandemic now, whether people want to read about it. I've actually gone in the opposite direction. I'm thinking, no, I don't. I've lived it. I don't want to write about it as well, because my genre is sort of upbeat feel-good fiction for the most part. I want to keep writing cheery things that might comfort people during a pandemic or other crisis, rather than adding more misery. But I think within the context of feel-good fiction, you can still address serious issues, but I won't be writing about the pandemic.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. Actually, it's nice to have that escapism almost, to have books that are written during the pandemic, not about the pandemic, but equally have the choice to dip into something that kind of addresses it. I think they're going to be really important books later on for people who are maybe quite young now, or just really don't want to reflect on it just now, but want to reflect on it later. So yeah, you've got a good point there. Yeah. Can I ask the same question to you, Lucienne?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think when it first started, I remember thinking to myself quite smugly, it's not really affecting me because I just sit at my desk and write all day. So, you know, what's changed? But then gradually over time, as Debbie says, you realise that you actually are losing that sense of being able to go out, of being able to mix with your writing community, your community of friends. You know, that gets quite difficult. And I also had one very practical issue, is that I couldn't visit places I wanted to set a story in. So I couldn't do the research I wanted to do. So the next Dan Foster novel is set in Wales, and I couldn't go to Anglesey at that time, you know. So I've only recently been able to go and actually sort of do the research backwards. I've written the book, now I've just got to double check I haven't made any howling mistakes. So there's that sort of practical side to it. And then, of course, there's the emotional impact. I mean, there's the grief, you know, that I think so many of us had to cope with at the same time. I couldn't see my mother for weeks and weeks and weeks. She was in a care home and she died before I could see her. So there's that as well, you know, which so many of us have had to put up with. So I think, yeah, in the end, the impact is quite strong. Before you don't even realise, and you suddenly look back and think, whoa, gosh, that was hard.
Absolutely. And I think there's so many stories, like tragic stories like that. And I'm so sorry to hear that. I also wanted to ask I'm trying to write some work for my PhD now, and I often find it very difficult to close off with so much going on, whether it's with work or family or things in the news, especially now. Do you have any tips on, and I think actually more people would write if they were able to allocate themselves time, and it is all about allocating yourself time and maybe saying no to some things in order to concentrate. How do you find the time, because you both do other things outside of writing? How are you able to shut off or shut down in a way to just get something on paper? Debbie, can I ask you first?
Yeah, I think in my ideal world I would spend the first couple of hours every morning writing. I'm very lucky that I've got space, dedicated space where I can just go and sit and write in my house. I've got a little hut in the garden. I'm very, very privileged to have that space. But I think designating a kind of a ritual in a way, so that you sort of program yourself to that when you pick up that notebook, when you pick up that pen, when you sit in this particular chair, or it might be in a coffee shop. Lots of people like writing in coffee shops or libraries. That you will just go and sit down at that space for a certain period of time and just write. You don't wait for the inspiration to strike you. Just pick up your pen, and even if you think you're writing rubbish to start with, just use that time and write, and you'll get it, because you need to get over a bit of sort of self-consciousness. You need to give yourself permission, and I think it also helps if you shut off the part of your brain that is the critic, your inner critic and your inner editor. Just get your story down, or your non-fiction, whatever it is. Just write without being critical, because you can go back afterwards and polish it and edit it and make it better. And that's how I write all the time. You can see, I'll just show you what this is, a draft You can see the edits. That's my first
quite
one.
neat,
It's
Debbie.
edits in red.
That's amazing.
And it's there is masses of red, but because I just write and write and write, turn on the writing side of my brain, and the editor can have her turn later, and that's so just letting yourself lose your inhibitions and write, because no one's going to see it unless you want them to. It's only for your eyes, and you are the one who matters.
That's incredible. It reminds me of having a teacher just put red pen all over your work. And I like the way you've chosen red as well.
Yes.
Lucienne, have you got any tips?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a huge question. I mean, there's so many different ways to write, and we all have to find, the way that's right for us. But I agree a lot with a lot of what Debbie said, particularly about, I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Natalie Goldman who called it the shitty first draft. You just write down, and it's like, it then becomes like that hunk of rock you carved the statue from. It's the raw material of your book. You write down what it is, or your blog or your story, whatever it is you're writing. I personally am a great planner. I'm one of these great list makers and planners, and I'm a plotter as well with my stories. So I plot the books in advance, so I have a kind of scaffolding for them, and I find that sort of, if you just say to yourself, oh, I'm just going to write today, it can work. But for me, I find if I say, right, between 9 and 12 today, I'm writing, and I put it in my diary, and I plan everything out, and I'm a bit of a sort of, it's a bit, I don't know, some people wouldn't like it. I use this book, actually, I was just getting it down from my shelf. There's this book called Your Best Year Yet, which is a book all about planning. There is a new edition. This is my ancient edition that I got for 50p in Oxfam or something years ago. And that's all about planning your time and deciding what you want to do, whether it's to write a novel or write a story or just write. And I use things like that, sort of planning things. So that I carve out the time by putting it in the diary, and I treat it like, it's like you've got a hospital appointment or a doctor's appointment. You go, you've got this appointment to write. But I'm not sure that would work for everyone. It's perhaps a bit, some people might find it a bit over organised.
I think
making yourself accountable is quite good as well. At the moment, I'm at the editing stage, as you can tell from that, and I've got this little chart. I've got 39 chapters to edit, and I'm colouring in a little square for each chapter as I go along to keep driving myself forward. I've only got to 6 out of 39 so far, so still got a lot to do. That helps.
I think that's interesting because I tend not to measure. So, you often see things on Twitter, people saying, oh, I wrote 3,000 words today. And I think, I write in scenes. I don't write in that kind of, I've got to do a count or I've got to do a chapter. I think, is the scene working? Am I leaving the scene in the right place so that tomorrow I'm picking it up again? I don't find that, counting works. But we all find different ways. But numbers, no, I'm not great with numbers.
I write a chapter at a time because that's a natural scene, and it just makes sense. It's a nice sort of digestible. It's like a course in a meal, or an episode in a television program or something. It just makes sense that way. I don't even look at words. I don't even plan for how many words a book should come out at.
No, it's got an organic shape that you need to let it grow. Yeah.
But I think you have to experiment and find what works for you, really, don't you? I mean, I'm still thinking about my process all the time and trying to find better ways of doing things. And I think you're also always learning, or you should always be learning as a writer as well. Keep an open mind.
I think that's fascinating because there's two very different perspectives from both of you of how you do it. And I feel like anyone listening will be able to pick out something from one of you to say, right, that's really something that I will take away and do. I love the little chart with the colours of the chapters. I'm quite visual, so I love that. But also having kind of like that diarising your time is helpful. And like you say, treating it like a dentist or doctor's appointment, because you really wouldn't want to be late for that. So you must make sure that you're not late for your writing, because otherwise it just slips into, kicking it down the road and you don't end up doing it. But the last question I had was anybody who's thinking of venturing into writing of any sort, what is the best way to get started in terms of, do you need a publisher? Do you need like an agent? Or is there any set way of actually getting published? Or can you just basically just send a chapter to a publisher or self-publish and then just see how it goes? Lucienne, maybe you've got some ideas of your journey.
Well, yeah, but Debbie's the expert on this. I mean, I've self-published so far, or independently published most of the stuff I've written, although I am looking for a publisher for my for the biography. So you can do a mix of things. I mean, and there's no rules about it. And I think independent publishing is really a great way to go. But actually, in a way, thinking about how am I going to publish the book is very premature. What you really want to do is think about where's the book? Where's the book first? That's got it for me. That's got to come first. Is the creative, the art is what comes first, and then you might think of the best way to get that out to people if that's what you want to do. So I mean, if your creativity is expressed in writing blogs, then obviously that's easy. You set up a blog, blah blah blah. If you want to write a book, there's so many ways you can bring it out. Yes, you can go down the submitting to publishers, looking for an agent. Good luck with that. It's tremendously difficult these days because they're just overwhelmed. I mean, you know, you get agents telling you they're getting, you know, like 1,000 submissions or something a week. So it's a hard route. It's a difficult route, but there are lots of other ways to get your work out there. And that's really exciting, I think. And as I say, Debbie is the expert on that.
Yeah, I'm actually just started teaching a course on self-publishing for Jericho Writers, which is a writers group serving writers worldwide. And I'm also UK ambassador for an organisation called the Alliance of Independent Authors. And I've self-published my books. I think the digital publishing, online retailing, the rise of the ebook, the rise of the audio book in digital form, all of these things have made it, I think, the best time ever to be a writer, because it's never been easier to get your work out there. Traditional publishers are becoming more and more risk averse. It's becoming more and more difficult to get contracts unless you are a celebrity or have decades of previous form as a bestseller. But that's the traditional route is only one way of reaching readers. There are you can reach so many readers through Amazon. As an independent author, you can also people can order your books from Waterstones or other bookshops as well, providing they've got your title, the book title, and your name. They can order it from their shop, even if you're from the local shop, even if you are self-published. And when you are an independent author, you are at the centre of the publishing process, whereas if you're published by a big firm, you are just a tiny cog in this enormous machine. So as the independent author, like me and Lucienne, we call the shots. We write what we want to write. We have the covers we want. We have the editors we want. We promote them how we want, and it's very empowering. So we're definitely proponents of that route, but also respectful of traditional publishing. And there are with Lucienne's history book, for example, that should be, you know, of prime interest to publishers of historical fiction about women's history. It's pretty mainstream, really. So there are lots of routes, and I'm licensing some of my rights to traditional publishing companies. So that, for example, I've sold the license for the audiobooks of my Sophie Sayers series to an audiobook specialist. And so you can mix and match, you know, you can do bits and pieces of each. But as Lucienne said, the main thing is write your story or your book or your memoir or your history book or whatever it is you want to write. Get the book done first and then worry about publishing it, because there's no point in trying to publish it until you've got your book written and it's the best it can be. And I think one of the important things that a lot of people don't realise is so important is to self-edit and to perfect your book and to go over it time and time again until you've polished it as much as you possibly can. And that's the time to start thinking about getting your masterpiece out to the world for readers to enjoy.
Oh yeah, sorry, Debbie. Can I just add one thing as well? I mean, I remember reading Julia Cameron. Julia Cameron, as you know, I'm a huge fan of her work. She writes books for writers, and she wrote this wonderful thing about people who can sort of block their own creativity by worrying about things like that, publishing prematurely. And she said it's like worrying that you've got to move to Hollywood before you've even written the screenplay. So, you know, you need to put the work first, and then you will learn as you go.
Yes.
There's an awful lot to learn.
Yes. Yeah.
Just get on and write, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. It's all
Find
about
that
writing.
Yeah.
that house and just put pen to paper or fingertips to the
Absolutely.
keyboard, whatever. Amazing. Well, I feel like I could sit here and talk to you for hours. It's so easy to listen to and to talk to. So, but I can't. And I'm so grateful for your time. So thank you so much, both of you. I really appreciate you coming on today. And if anybody wants to get in touch with either of these authors' work, then please do look them up. And we've put details in the description of the video as well for people to search your work and start reading. So thank you very much and have a lovely rest of World Book Day. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So we are going to just give a little bit of some promos to our next live stream that we're having. And that is to do with sort of a QA session that we're having with the Minister for Health and Care. And we'd really love you to join us. But before you join us, we'd also love to have your questions for the Minister. So we aren't prescriptive about the questions. Of course, it's whatever you would like MP Gillian Keegan to answer for you, and she has willingly agreed to spend around about half an hour, 45 minutes answering your questions. We very much want to put your questions to her rather than our questions to her. So we've already had some fantastic questions come in, I think probably well over 50, but some of them are very much of the same theme. So we want to try and create as many questions as possible. But the first thing you need to do is, wherever you're watching us now, if you could subscribe, that would be great. And if it's Facebook, you can like our page. And of course, if you are on YouTube, if you press the bell next to the subscription button, then you'll get an automatic notification when we go live. So it's on Monday, but from 5 o'clock. But of course, you can set your reminders, pop it in your diary if you subscribe to our channels. So we very much want to represent your voice, especially if you work in health and social care. And we'll be really lucky to have a fantastic panel that comes after Gillian to almost critically analyze, dissect, add commentary to some of the answers to your questions from Gillian. So very much hoping for you to participate and help us with that, and also to just watch and engage. Want to get as many people watching that as possible. So you've got all our details of how to get involved there. And if you want to ask us a question for Monday, then you can email us hi@coproducecare.com, or if you would like to just follow us on Twitter, then we will pick up your questions on Twitter. You can message us, or you can just put a comment on one of the tweets that we put out about this live stream for Monday. And of course, you can just get in contact with us on Facebook as well. Any method, we will pick it up. But really looking forward to you participating in that if you can. So what I might do is I will just leave the thumbnail, the picture of next Thursday up on the screen for a couple of seconds if you need to write down the information for that, and then after that we will stop going live. So thanks everyone for watching today. Happy World Book Day, and I hope you enjoyed this session and any future sessions we have later on in the year. Thanks very much. Bye bye.